The rains had ended, and the red earth of the village still glistened under the morning sun. The scent of wet soil and fresh grass hung in the air, the kind of morning that made birds sing louder as though celebrating the new season. But while the land rejoiced, a young woman's heart was being setting on a path of waiting, a wait that would stretch far beyond what anyone could imagine. Her name was Amara. She was only 18 then, with eyes wide as the river sky and laughter that bubbled like water over stones. When she walked through the marketplace, children ran to her for sweets, women greeted her with warm smiles, and even the elders nodded, whispering, "That girl will make a fine wife." And indeed, there was one who had already promised to claim her heart. Oba, the blacksmith's son, strong, tall, his arms hardened by the fire and hammer of his trade. When he laughed, it was deep and confident, and when his gaze rested on Amara, it softened like clay under rain. They would meet beneath the great iroko tree at the edge of the village, where the branches reached so high it seemed they touched the heavens. There, Oba spoke the words that wrapped chains of hope around Amara's heart. "Amara," he said one evening, as the last light of the sun painted the sky in gold, "I must go. My father sends me to the distant towns to trade and to learn. It may take years before I return, but hear me." He took her hand, his grip warm and steady. "I will come back for you. No matter how long it takes, I will return, and you will be my wife." Her breath caught at his words, her chest swelling with both pride and fear. She whispered, "Promise me, Oba." He nodded, his eyes fierce with conviction. "I promise. Nothing will break the bond we share." And with that, he left her with only the memory of his voice and the echo of his footsteps fading down the red road. From that day forward, Amara's heart began its long wait. But what she didn't know was how cruel waiting can become. The first year passed easily enough. Each morning she carried water from the stream, humming the songs they once sang together. Each market day she lingered by the blacksmith's forge, though the fire no longer roared and Oba's hammer no longer struck. She smiled at neighbors who teased, "He will return, child, he will return." And she believed them. By the second year, her friends began to marry, one by one. The girls she had played with became wives and mothers. Their laughter filled new homes, their babies strapped to their backs as they fetched water or pounded yam. But Amara, she waited. Always she waited. On festival days when the drums echoed across the hills and the air smelled of roasted yam and palm wine, she saved a calabash of drink, untouched for the day Oba would return. She told herself, "This is the year he will come. The road cannot hold him forever." Yet as the third, fourth, and even the fifth year crept by, her neighbors' whispers grew sharp. "She is wasting her youth." Some said, "She waits for a shadow." Others mocked. Amara pretended not to hear. She smiled, bowed her head, and repeated the words her grandmother had once told her. "The tree that bends to the storm does not break. It waits for the sun." But storms, my friends, can last longer than anyone expects. By the 7th year, the sun that once danced in Amara's eyes began to dim. Her laughter was no longer like water over stones. It was quieter now, as though she feared it might betray her longing. Children still loved her, yes, but she walked with a heaviness that had not been there before. Every evening she went to the edge of the village, to that same iroko tree where Oba had spoken his promise. She pressed her palm against the bark and whispered, "He will come, he must come." But what Amara did not know was that fate was already preparing a cruel twist for her heart, because while she counted the years in hope, Oba was counting them in silence. And silence, as the elders say, is the loudest answer of all. And so she waited. 1 year passed, then 2. Each season brought its own rhythm, the planting, the harvest, the festival drums, but to Amara they all sounded the same, the ticking of time against a heart that would not let go. By the 5th year, her hair no longer hung in the playful braids of a girl. She now tied it in the careful wraps of a grown woman, her steps slower, her laughter softer. When she walked through the marketplace, people no longer teased her about Oba's return. They lowered their voices instead. "She waits for a shadow," one neighbor whispered as Amara passed with her basket of yams. Another sighed, "He has forgotten her. Only a fool waits this long." Their words stung, but Amara kept her gaze forward, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. At night, when the world was hushed, she would sit by the fire and remember the proverb her grandmother used to say, "The tree that bends to the storm does not break, it waits for the sun." She repeated it like a prayer. "I am that tree," she told herself. "The storm will pass. My son will return." But what Amara did not know was that sometimes the storm has no end. Sometimes the sun never rises, and the years ahead would prove it in ways more painful than she could ever imagine. Because while Amara's heart bent in patience, fate was already weaving a different path for her, one that no one in the village could have predicted. Every market day, Amara's eyes wandered down the dusty road that cut through the hills, half expecting to see Oba's tall frame appear like a shadow against the horizon. She would pause, her basket balanced on her hip, her breath caught between hope and disappointment. But always, the road remained empty, carrying only strangers, traders, and wandering goats. Each festival season, when the drums pounded and the air filled with the scent of roasted yam and palm wine, Amara prepared something special. She set aside one calabash of sweet palm wine, untouched, waiting for the moment Oba would walk through the gates so she could place it in his hands. But the years passed like dry leaves in the wind. Her friends married. They bore children, filled their courtyards with laughter, and built homes of their own. Amara danced at their weddings, sang lullabies to their babies, and smiled as though her heart carried no weight. Yet in the stillness of night, when the fire had died and no one could see her, her pillow grew wet with tears. Each one carried a prayer. Let him return, let him keep his word. But what she did not know was that destiny often hides its sharpest knife behind silence. Then one evening, as the moon rose high and the yam festival drums thundered across the hills, a murmur stirred in the village. It spread like sparks through dry grass. Quick, unstoppable. Oba is coming back. He is near. The whispers ran from the marketplace to the courtyards, from the old men at the palm wine stand to the children chasing fireflies. Amara froze when she heard it. The calabash she held nearly slipped from her trembling hands. For a moment, the world seemed to spin. 10 long years of waiting, 10 long years of prayers, doubts, and whispered shame. And now, finally, the promise was about to be kept. Her heart raced, beating louder than the festival drums themselves. She pressed her hands against her chest, whispering, "He has returned. My Oba has returned." But what Amara did not yet know was that the man walking toward the village did not come alone, and the truth he carried with him would break her heart in ways no one had foreseen. But what the villagers saw next silenced the drums themselves. The dancers froze mid-step, their feet heavy as stone. The drummers' hands hovered above the skins, the last beat echoing into silence. Even the children, who had been chasing each other through the firelight, stopped and stared at the road. Oba had arrived. He stood tall at the village gate, the firelight glinting on his broad shoulders, his clothes carrying the dust of distant journeys. He looked stronger, fuller, his face sharpened by years away. The villagers gasped. Yes, their blacksmith's son had returned, just as he had promised, but then their eyes fell on the figure walking beside him. Her hand was in his, delicate and certain, her fingers curled with the grip of possession. A woman, a new wife. Her anklets jingled like laughter with every step, silver catching the torchlight. Her wrapper was rich with foreign patterns. Her headscarf gleamed with beads. and her eyes radiated with pride, as if the whole village now belonged to her. The whispers began at once. Is this his wife? After 10 years, he brings another? Then what of Amara? At the edge of the crowd, Amara's heart shattered in silence. The calabash she had carried for years, the one she had saved for his return, slipped from her hands and crashed against the ground. Palm wine spilled into the dust, sinking into the earth like the years of her waiting, wasted in an instant. Her body trembled, but no words came. Her lips parted as if to speak, yet all that escaped was a shallow breath. The man she had given her youth to, the man whose promise had kept her alive through 10 long years, had returned, not for her. The villagers' eyes darted from Amara to Oba, from Oba to the new wife. The air grew thick with tension, heavy enough to choke. Some shook their heads in pity, others clucked their tongues, while the children, too young to understand, clung to their mother's skirts. But what Amara did not yet know was that this betrayal was only the beginning of her nightmare, for the wound cut deeper than a broken promise, and the days to come would test not only her heart, but her very soul. The air froze, even the night breeze seemed to stop moving, as though the whole world had held its breath. Amara's clay pot slipped from her trembling hands and crashed against the earth. The shattering echoed like thunder, and all around her, heads turned, shards scattered at her feet, glistening with spilled palm wine, the liquid darkening the red soil. Her lips quivered. She wanted to scream, to cry out, to curse the heavens, but no sound came. Her throat closed, her breath trapped like a bird in a cage. All she could do was stare at him, at Oba, the man she had given her youth to, the man whose name she whispered into the night for 10 long years, the man whose promise had kept her heart alive when everything else told her to give up. And he had returned, not to claim her, not to keep his word, but to bring another woman into her place. A hollow silence swallowed the festival grounds. The villagers' eyes darted between Amara and the stranger, their whispers sharp as knives. 10 years she waited. For this, the spirits must be laughing tonight. But Amara stood frozen, her face pale as the moon, the laughter of children, the beat of the drums, the smell of roasted yam, all of it faded into nothing. She heard only the thundering of her own heart, beating faster, louder, as if it might burst through her chest. Her hands clenched, her body shaking. She should have run. She should have turned away, but her feet would not move. She remained rooted in place, forced to watch Oba's arm slip protectively around his new bride's shoulders. And yet, this was only the beginning of her sorrow, because what Amara did next, my friends, what she did in the days that followed, would leave the village in shock. Some would whisper her name in pity, others in fear, and still others in awe. For though her heart was broken, Amara was not a woman to be forgotten, and her next choice would change not only her fate, but the story of the entire village. The days that followed were heavy with whispers. At the well, women lowered their voices as Amara approached. Poor girl, one muttered, shaking her head. She wasted her best years on a man who forgot her. Another scoffed. A fool's heart waits too long. Even the spirits turn away from such blindness. Children carried the gossip to their mothers. Men discussed it over palm wine. And everywhere Amara went, eyes followed her, not with admiration as before, but with pity, with mockery, with cruel curiosity. Yet Amara, to the surprise of all, carried herself with grace. She greeted the new wife with a calm smile, bowing her head in welcome. She brought gifts to their compound, yam flour for cooking, firewood for the hearth. She offered kind words, even laughter, as though her heart had never been bruised. When Oba passed by, she lowered her gaze respectfully, as though she were only another villager, and not the woman who had waited 10 long years for his return. The people shook their heads. She hides her shame behind a smile. Her heart must be dust by now. But inside, Amara's heart was burning. For beneath her quiet dignity lived a fire fierce enough to consume everything it touched. And what no one in the village knew was that Amara carried a secret, one buried deep in her soul, sealed long ago beneath a great iroko tree, a secret bound not only to her love for Oba, but to the spirits themselves. And when such secrets awaken, they do not sleep again. 10 years earlier, on the night before Oba's departure, Amara had not slept. The village was quiet, the fires dying low. Crickets fill in the air with their endless song. She had slipped out of her hut barefoot, the cool earth damp beneath her feet, and made her way to the edge of the village where the great iroko tree rose into the heavens. There, under the moonlight, Oba was waiting. His broad shoulders glistened faintly with sweat from the forge, his eyes restless but determined. He held her hands in his, and in that moment the weight of their parting pressed heavily upon them both. "Amara," he whispered, his voice rough, "the road is long and the world is wide, but you must believe me. I will return. You will be my wife. Nothing will change." The tears welled in her eyes. "Words fade with time, Oba. What if distance makes you forget?" His jaw tightened. He looked toward the towering tree, its branches swaying as though listening. Then he reached for a sharp piece of iron he carried from his forge. Without hesitation, he drew it across his palm. A thin line of red welled up, glistening under the moon. "Then let it not be words alone," he said. "Let it be blood." Amara's breath caught, but she understood. With trembling fingers, she took the iron shard and pressed it against her own skin. Pain stung, warm blood rising to the surface. They clasped their hands together, blood mixing, dripping between their fingers, soaking into the roots of the ancient iroko. Their voices merged in a whisper that seemed to stir the air itself. "No matter where we go, our lives are bound. If one betrays, the spirits will avenge." For a moment the wind picked up, hissing through the leaves, as though the tree itself had accepted their vow. And when they pulled their hands apart, the blood stains remained, not only on their palms, but on the earth beneath them. That night, they buried the secret beneath the iroko's roots, a vow not written in ink or carved in the stone, but sealed in the unseen realm, where spirits keep their accounts. And now, a decade later, that vow still slept beneath the ancient tree, waiting like a hunter in the dark, because promises sealed in blood are never forgotten, and when broken, their price is always collected. The villagers laughed at her patience. "She is still waiting in her heart," they mocked, "when the man has already chosen another." But none of them knew what Amara carried inside her. They did not know the secret buried beneath the iroko roots. They did not know that spirits do not forget. At first, life seemed ordinary in Oba's new household. His young bride swept the compound, her anklets jingling, her laughter ringing like bells. Oba himself walked proudly through the village, showing the wealth of his travels. To many, it looked as though Amara had been erased, replaced, forgotten. But on the 7th night after his return, when the moon swam behind restless clouds, something strange stirred. From Oba's compound came cries that tore through the silence of midnight. The new wife twisted in her sleep, her hands clawing at her chest, her breath ragged as though unseen fingers pressed upon her lungs. Her jewelry clattered against the mat as she writhed, gasping for air. Oba leapt up in terror, shaking her, shouting her name. But before he could even gather his thoughts, his own body was seized by a force he could not see. He woke screaming, his voice raw, his arms flailing, and from his lips burst a name he thought had long been buried. "Amara! Amara!" The cry echoed through the night, chilling every ear that heard it. By dawn, the village elders had gathered, sitting in a circle outside his compound, their faces grim, their voices low. Smoke from their pipes curled into the pale sky as they muttered to one another. "The ancestors are angry," one said. "A vow has been broken," another replied, his eyes fixed on the ground. "This is the punishment of spirits," whispered a third. "No man breaks blood oaths and walks free." The crowd that formed outside the compound trembled, Unsure whether to pity Oba or fear him, children clung to their mothers. The women shook their heads and muttered prayers, but what none of them expected was what Amara herself would do next. For while others called for curses and punishment, Amara carried something even more powerful than vengeance, and her choice would silence the village more than any spirit's wrath. But what Amara did next shocked even the spirits themselves. The villagers had gathered outside Oba's compound, whispering, waiting. Some expected her to call upon curses. Others thought she would stand in the courtyard and shout for vengeance. After all, who could blame her? 10 years of waiting, only to be betrayed. 10 years of silence, only to be humiliated. Yet Amara did not come with rage. When she finally appeared, her figure was calm, steady, her wrapper tied neatly, her steps slow but certain. In her hands, she carried a single calabash covered with cloth. The crowd parted in silence as she walked past, their eyes wide with disbelief. "Is she bringing poison?" one woman muttered. "Perhaps the spirits themselves have filled that bowl," an elder said, his brow furrowed. But Amara's eyes did not burn with hatred. They carried something deeper, something unreadable. She entered the compound, where Oba's new wife lay pale and trembling, her breath shallow, her hands clutching at her chest, as though invisible ropes bound her lungs. Oba knelt beside her, his face streaked with sweat and fear. He looked up when Amara entered, shame crashing over him like waves. His lips moved, but no words came. Amara set the calabash before her, unwrapped the cloth, and revealed a mixture of herbs, bitter roots, ground leaves and powders she had prepared in secret. She knelt quietly, crushing the roots with her own hands, murmuring prayers under her breath. Her voice was soft, steady, almost like a lullaby carried on the wind. The villagers pressed closer to the doorway, straining to see. The air was thick with silence. At last, Amara dipped her fingers into the mixture, placed them gently on the woman's brow, and whispered, "The one who wronged me was not you. Rest, sister. The fire is not yours to carry." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the new wife's breathing began to steady. Her trembling ceased. Her chest rose and fell calmly, her face softening with relief. She opened her eyes slowly, as though waking from a long nightmare. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The sickness is gone. She healed her. After all she suffered, she gave mercy. Even the elders who had warned of spirits and curses lowered their heads in awe. And Oba bowed his face to the ground, unable to look at the woman he had betrayed. The villagers watched in silence, stunned. They had expected fury. They had expected revenge. But instead, Amara had chosen something greater, something stronger than any curse. She had chosen mercy. But what the people did not yet realize was that this act of mercy would cut Oba's heart more deeply than vengeance ever could. And the lesson it carried would be told for generations. And Oba fell to his knees before her. The proud blacksmith's son, who had once stood so tall, now bent low, his forehead almost touching the earth. Tears ran down his face, streaking the dust on his cheeks. His hands trembled as he reached for Amara's feet, but he could not bring himself to touch her. His voice broke like a child's. "I betrayed you, yet you saved the one I brought in your place. You healed her when you had every right to curse us both. You are greater than me, Amara. Greater than I will ever be." The villagers gasped. Never before had they seen Oba humbled. Never had they heard his voice shake with shame. Even the elders, who had lived long enough to see countless quarrels and betrayals, bowed their heads at the sight. Amara did not move. She stood tall, the soft glow of the setting sun catching the wrap of her headscarf, making her appear almost carved from bronze. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady as the earth itself. "A man may forget a promise, Oba," she said quietly, but each word struck like a drumbeat. "But the spirits do not, and still, love that waits too long turns into a shadow. You are no longer mine. You are hers. Go, and may you keep this vow better than the last." Her words hung in the air, like incense smoke, heavy and fragrant with truth. Oba lowered his head, the weight of her mercy crushing him more than any curse could. The new wife, still weak but breathing freely, reached out a trembling hand toward Amara, her eyes filling with tears. The villagers whispered to one another, some with awe, some with shame. They had expected a spectacle of vengeance, but they had witnessed something deeper, the kind of strength that doesn't strike but releases. And as Amara turned to leave, her footsteps slow and measured, a hush followed her. Even the wind seemed to pause, carrying her words away to the hills so that they might be remembered for generations. A promise is only as strong as the one who keeps it, and patience without wisdom is a chain that binds the soul. The villagers carried her words like fireflies into the night. They whispered them over hearths, repeated them by flickering lamps, and passed them down like secrets wrapped in smoke. Mothers warned their sons, "A woman's patience is not endless. Do not waste it, for once it breaks, it never returns." Fathers told their daughters, "Do not tie your youth to a promise that drifts like smoke in the wind. Guard your heart, for love that lingers too long in waiting can wither before it ever blooms." And so Amara lived, not as the woman abandoned, not as the one mocked for her waiting, but as the one whose strength outlasted betrayal, whose mercy silenced vengeance, and whose truth outlived broken promises. Her story traveled far beyond the village. It was carried across rivers, retold in bustling markets, and whispered by travelers who had never seen her face but knew her name. And with every telling, the lesson remained bright and unbroken, like embers that refuse to die. The heart that waits without wisdom waits in vain. A promise is only as strong as the one who keeps it. And so the tale of Amara became not just a story of sorrow, but of strength, a reminder that love may falter, promises may fail, but dignity and wisdom endure far longer than the years of waiting.